Hello, and welcome to today's webinar. We'll be discussing two very timely topics, improving online learning and getting ready for the eventual return to campus. I'm Abby Lundberg. I'm a business technology researcher and writer, and president of Lundberg Media. I'll be moderating today's discussion. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping notes. This webinar will be recorded and available to all of you within 3 to 4 business days. We welcome your questions for our speakers. You can enter them anytime in the questions module on the GoToWebinar control panel. Or you can submit questions on Twitter using the hashtag MITSMREvent. We'll answer as many questions as possible after the presentations and before we wrap up about an hour from now. You can also use the questions module to get help if you have any trouble with the audio or other technical issues. I'm really excited about today's webinar. It is such a unique time to be having this conversation. With campuses locked down due to COVID-19, colleges and universities worldwide have scrambled to create new remote educational environments, and these are still evolving as we speak. This unprecedented situation makes engaging students online more critical than ever before. For many institutions, it requires new technology, new capabilities among educators, and new structures and approaches. Meanwhile, these same institutions are developing a range of options for returning to safe in-person instruction on their physical campuses. We have two industry leaders with us today to help us make sense of what's happening and see our way to what's next. Sanjay Sarma is Vice President for Open Learning at MIT, and Prakash Tripathi is Senior Director and Head of Product Management at HARMAN International. They'll discuss the challenges and opportunities of online learning and considerations for the eventual return to campus. We're incredibly fortunate to have Sanjay Sarma with us today. Professor Sarma is Vice President for Open Learning and the Flowers Professor of Mechanical Engineering at MIT. He previously served as MIT's Dean for Digital Learning, and he oversees MITx, which delivers massive open online courses, or MOOCs, to millions of students worldwide. He's currently leading MIT's Task Force 2021 and beyond, an initiative to examine the new challenges and opportunities that may face MIT in a post-COVID world. Professor Sarma's credentials as an academic are equaled only by his deep expertise in technology, in particular those that enable new forms of connectivity and communication. He co-founded the Auto ID Center at MIT, which coined the term Internet of Things, and he developed many of the key technologies behind the EPC suite of RFID standards now used worldwide. He serves on the boards and advisory boards of many technology companies and startups, and advises several national governments and global companies. Welcome, Sanjay.
Thank you, Abby. A pleasure to be here. I'm going to avoid slides. I think we're all zoomed out and slides out. So I'm going to instead just speak to, I think, what is a really tremendous situation. It's so surreal. It's very hard to believe what we're facing. Let's start with education and COVID. This crisis struck us in America in March, other places earlier. MIT very quickly decided to get our undergraduate students and graduate students off campus. Undergraduates, those who could, went home. Obviously, a lot of international students could not, and we accommodated them, students with other circumstances. And the grad students live more independently, so they went home. We shut down the labs, and we did that all in about a week. Now, in about 10 days, 15 days, we were fully online. We took 1,247 out of 1,251 courses online in those days. And our history there makes it somewhat easier, perhaps, than for other schools. We've been doing open learning now for, or digital learning for 20 years. We started with OpenCourseWare. MIT put its curricula online, and OpenCourseWare now has had more than 500 million visitors. And OpenCourseWare was the inspiration for a number of other activities. One of our alums, Sal Khan, created Khan Academy. another of our alums, actually a dropout from MIT. It's a good career move, by the way, to drop out from MIT, it seems. Started a company called Quizlet, which has about 50% of high school students in America enrolled. OpenCourseWare also inspired Sebastian Thrun, but to us, most importantly, it inspired the creation of edX. And edX has now crossed 100 million enrollments worldwide. I serve on the board of edX, and edX is like a YouTube. It's like a platform where you can take massive open online courses, and we at MIT produce content for it. Our production unit is called MITx, and we produce more than 200 courses. edX is jointly owned by Harvard and MIT. Harvard has HarvardX, Berkeley has BerkeleyX, and all these units produce courses for edX. edX has seen its numbers absolutely skyrocket, as you might imagine, in this time frame, because literally 10x, in some cases 100x, some courses, as people have been in lockdown looking for learning. Now, within MIT, I would say most of our courses have gone to Zoom, actually. But the few that were that were edX ready have done really well, because we spent a lot of time producing very well curated courses, and these courses, they were already running on edX. We could point our students at that content. We'd already flipped the classroom, and so if you've sort of pre-flipped the classroom in those courses, then obviously the in-person element is missing. You can't do physical experiments, etc. But through Zoom, we can do coaching, etc. So for those courses, it was great. But in developing online content, MIT faculty and staff, over a third of our faculty are already sort of online experienced. We were in very good shape to go fully online, and we went through the spring. We also did something fairly historic. We made all the grades pass, no pass, recognizing this was a very difficult time for students. I'm very proud of MIT for making that call. It was more humane, and we got through the spring with, I would say, success. In fact, our graduation was also online, and it was actually very sweet. It was quite lovely. We had everything from a musical composition, which was sung by thousands of students. Essentially, they all submitted notes, and we merged it and we created this musical composition. It's called Co-Musica. You can check it out. So it was amazing. And I would say around the world, universities have been heroic. Professors have been heroic. Students have been heroic. Sitting in their homes, professors with oscilloscopes. I have pictures of my colleagues with oscilloscopes on their kitchen tables, rigging up experiments, putting them on Zoom, and taking the graph and piping it into Zoom and doing experiments online. It's been absolutely magnificent. And so that's the heroism. Now, I'm going to now talk a little bit about the future, and then I'll talk about back to school and back to work, in fact. So this is great. COVID is a tragedy. It's unfolding around the world. It has shocked us, and academia has reacted, and the whole world has reacted in a way that is inspiring. But there is a problem. The problem is this: when professors and students are back in the university, are we going to end up in a situation where we're going to do the same thing that we were doing on Zoom, except without Zoom? The fact of the matter is, our education system is actually caught in something of a bind. The fact that it was so easy to go to Zoom is partly because our education system was socially distanced to begin with. What I mean by that is professors basically lecturing to students, and students listening in a large classroom, dozing off sometimes, checking out their Instagram feeds, Telegram, WhatsApp, right? Not really paying attention. Now you might say that's because the students don't pay attention. That's their problem. That's their fault. Not true. Not true. The science of learning tells us, and I actually have a book coming out with this topic. It's called GRASP, the science transforming how we learn. It'll come out in August. And I wrote the book because I was doing research on the science of learning, that the cognitive architecture of the brain is such that you and I, and most humans on the planet, child or adult, can only absorb new material for about 10 minutes. And yet every lecture is 45 minutes, 90 minutes, or an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours. And when the student stops paying attention, professors love to wag a finger and say, you're not paying attention. But that is actually not fair, because the brain is not designed to do that. The brain is actually designed to absorb information in 10-minute chunks. And every parent knows this. In fact, parenting is a better model for teaching, and being a child is a better model for learning, even for adults, than the educational approach we've taken today, because the educational approach we've taken today is one way, and one in which attention wanders off after 10 minutes. By the way, the technical term for it is mind wandering. The cognitive psychology word for it is default mode. And in fact, the Zoom lecture is not so much worse. So the fact that Zoom works is actually bad news. It means we weren't doing something right to begin with. I believe that the future of learning, when once COVID is done, when students go back to the classroom, they're going to demand a lot more. Why are they, staying in dorms? Why are they away from their parents? Well, being away from parents is sometimes a joy, but leaving that aside, why are they paying for the high tuitions if what they're getting is the same thing they could get on Zoom? So education has to reinvent the game, and the reinvention, in my view, is coaching. In other words, we've got to do lectures online, not in a synchronous way like we do in Zoom, but using online prepackaged asynchronous content, which is done beautifully. The Zoom lecture is not a good way to do it. It's in fact the worst of both worlds. And that online content coupled with instant feedback creates a very nice learning environment. That's why we created edX. edX is open source. It's a nonprofit precisely for that reason. And students can consume that in the subway, in their dorm rooms, etc. But when they come into the classroom has to be flipped. It has to be engaged. It has to be engaging. They got to be building stuff. They got to be discussing, disputing, arguing. They've got to be doing experiments. They've got to be working on projects. The classroom time, when we have it back, cannot be squandered on boring one-way lectures like I'm doing to you right now. So that, I think, is the future of education and learning. And universities that figure this out, we have a shot at succeeding. A lot of universities today are going to die, unfortunately. A lot of private liberal art colleges, unfortunately, will not survive this. Ironically, the ones that are in trouble are the ones who actually get this right, because they're all about the experience of the immersion. But a lot of the universities that will succeed are the ones that flip their strategy and go to true experiential learning, coaching, and things like that. Last couple of comments. Our return to work and our return to in-person education is not going to be easy. I was actually on a phone call this morning. It's going to involve testing. It's going to involve attestations before you go in. It's going to involve social distancing, where students can't sit too close together. The professor's far away. Even on campus, students will be in their rooms taking online classes. And then we will need to do a lot of contact tracing. We'll have to look at questions like, who was near whom, using Bluetooth or ultra-wideband or ultrasound, maybe dongles, maybe wearables. It'll involve a lot of wearables for some schools. We're actually looking at that to see if we can monitor the student's temperature. This is going to be a tough time, and this is the same for work. Flying is going to involve a new type of visa, which to say that you have either a vaccination or you have antibodies because you felt sick and you recovered. This is our new reality. And so the fall is going to be very tough weather in the education industry. And a lot of this is inevitable, but it will really make the education experience difficult. But we're up for it. MIT has announced that we're going to bring back a quarter of our students and the seniors, because they have to graduate. Harvard has announced they're going to bring a quarter back. It's the freshmen, the first years, because that's their priority. And the other students at MIT will learn online. We will do extensive testing. We're going to do contact tracing. Every student will have a single room, which is unfortunate because the whole point of college is to mix, but that's the very license that COVID has taken away, mixing. But college is about mixing, tragically. Why single rooms? Because if a student falls sick, they have a single room in which they can self-isolate. And then we have extra space for students who have no choice and who have to come back, international students, etc. So it's going to be a very, very difficult time going forward. in the fall. And universities in some ways are the sort of the most difficult case study, but really very similar things will happen in education. What this is going to do is fundamentally transform the way in which we do online education even more. I like to joke that the 21st century did not begin in 2000. The 21st century begins in 2021. 2000 was just an extension of the 1990s. Amazon was already a company, Google was already a company, right? Until 9/11 was a shock, but even that, compared to what's happening now, is absolutely, this is a international retraining of proportions that are hard to capture, hard to have predicted, and hard to guess the implications of. Post 2021, that is starting next year, I think we're going to be in a period of a lot of flux. Some people say we're going to hit a new normal. I would contend maybe we hit a new abnormal, because this is not the last coronavirus. We have climate change coming up. We'll have economic distress. We'll have political distress, international strife. All this is in our future. And academia has to figure out how to do two things. One is to survive and do well, but perhaps equally importantly, how to contribute in this environment. When we started online 20 years ago with OpenCourseWare, and now more than 500 million people have downloaded content from OpenCourseWare. And when we started MIT edX in 2011, and now edX has crossed 100 million enrollments, staggering numbers. They all seem sort of, well, it's a good thing to do. No, it's good, you're helping the world. Suddenly now, in 2020, in the midst of the COVID crisis, we're realizing that this thing that seemed like a good thing to do is the string by which a vast fraction of humanity hangs. We're hanging by a little string. And that string is online education. Digital transformation as a whole, actually, is that resiliency measure. I'll end with this thought. The internet was designed as a resiliency measure during the Cold War. The idea was that, no one could bomb out a trunk network and isolate a city or a radar installation. And the internet was, highly connected in a way that the packet would find its way to the end. Similarly, to me, online education is a resiliency measure for society. Our challenge is going to be engagement. And online education is to figure out how to get engagement going online, but residential education had better get engagement right, because that's what residential is for. So I'll leave you with that thought, and I'm happy to take more questions afterwards. Back to you, Abby.
Great, thank you, Sanjay. Really, really thought-provoking comments there, and I can't wait till we get to the questions. Our next speaker, though, for now is Prakash Tripathi. Prakash is Senior Director and Head of Product Management at HARMAN International. In this role, Prakash leads product management, product engineering, and go-to-market functions for digital transformation solutions. This portfolio serves multiple vertical markets. In addition to education, it includes telecom, healthcare, retail, and industrial. Previously, Prakash held technology and business management roles at Keysight, or Agilent, Aerosint Technologies, and Delphi Automotive. He has also served on the board of the IMS NGN Forum, which is a global industry association that focuses on next generation network deployment. Based in India, he received an MBA from the Indian Institute of Technology at Kharagpur and a bachelor's in engineering, National Institute of Technology. A warm welcome to you, Prakash.
Good morning, good evening to everyone. I'm very happy to share my perspective on how things are, and from a technology lens standpoint, how technology can contribute to improve the situation. So let's start by looking at the context we are here. So online education or remote education has been there. The internet in the mid-90s actually started this, and this has been growing. Now with the COVID, the percentage of online education would probably drastically change as compared to on campus. From thinking from the perspective of distance learning and the relationship that students have with the campus, this is like a long distance relationship. And as with any long distance relationships, the tendency of fallout or dropouts is significantly higher as compared to on campus or in personal relationships. The other aspect to just keep in mind is what is the purpose of the education per se. From a technology standpoint, as I see it, it's an upgrade. Just like in the Internet of Things world, you look at doing software and updates onto devices so that they do perform better on the task that they're supposed to do. Education enables students to get better at things so that on the subject or topic in question, they are better with the education than they were otherwise. So that's the role. And let's keep that context in mind as we go through what is presenting to us as a challenge and how technology can look at solving some of those issues that exist. So moving on, we are now talking about moving education online has already happened. I think we heard from MIT that they have been successful at it. But what is the challenge? The challenge is how do you engage the student? And I was reading somewhere the average attention span of humans right now is less than that of a goldfish. Typically, to retain attention, you just have an 8-second time window. Now, with that kind of an environment where students, attention from a remote standpoint is also up for other tools, technologies, and applications to pick up, how do you ensure that it is engaging enough? Just like in the case of the new connected devices and IoT space, you have to have an underlying technology platform which enables you to deliver new software update to the devices. The new generation of online education, which is more or less forced on us, requires underlying technology, digital, so to say, platform for engaging students, which goes beyond just providing them access and content, but it needs to become seamless. There are different systems today, like learning management systems, the collaboration platforms like Zoom or otherwise, which people are using, proctoring tools, and even tools for people to create valuable contents, and labs which are going to become remotely accessible as well. But these are disparate systems. How do they need to come together to deliver what we call the right student experience for them to be tuned in so that their dropout rates reduces? All of this that we are looking to do also has the cost paradigm associated with it. The institutes, most of whom that we have talked to, are looking at kind of working under the cost constraints, and all of these solutions need to support that paradigm as well. Moving further down the line, Sanjay talked about experiential learning, and we going beyond and looking from a technology and a platform standpoint, how we could deliver next generation of experiences to the student, and thereby keeping in mind what's available today and tomorrow to deliver that. AR, VR possibly, but no, all of this adds complexity. So this is one side of enabling content access, enabling it to be smooth at lower cost and ready for future. The whole other aspect around data that is getting generated through this online interaction, how you can take data-driven insights to improve the overall experience that the students and faculty have as they start to interact on the online systems today. So with those as thought-provoking points, how do we take that journey? Now, as you would, and again, I will draw parallels with Internet of Things or connected devices. The first step is to ensure remote connectivity, which means in the student paradigm that they have access to content from anywhere, which also for some of the institute means moving some of your IT application assets to the cloud platform. and ability to consume content on any device. Students bring devices from tablets, from phones, computers, and it should enable seamless connectivity. I think this step, when we had the change forced on us because of COVID, is there. But then comes the next 2, 3, and 4 steps, which I think technology needs to be looked at and needs to deliver to improve the overall student engagement. It needs to become invisible. The student should kind of be intuitive, assets at their disposal, so that all of these things work together, right from learning management systems, collaboration tools, proctoring tools, etc., all coming together. Some of the platforms today are already supporting it, but need further improvements. Uh, from a format standpoint, not all learning media is equal. You require eyeball to eyeball contact, which collaboration platforms provide, but you also require an ability to push curated content to be consumed by students at their leisure. So having capability to do that. And finally, an ability to have intelligent one-on-one personal interactions also enabled, so that the long distance relationship between the teachers and students could further be strengthened. Of course, making the labs also remotely accessible is something which we see as essential as the online education platforms evolve. The step 3, which tries to look at how you make it more engaging, how you provide a platform for students to share learning with other students. The whole thing that students typically miss when they are working or learning remotely. How do you bring the element around them, uh, so to say, tuned or in the loop for coming back to the platform? Gamifications could be one option. So looking at from that perspective. Also learn from the interactions that student had while they accessed, consumed, and responded back to the content, and create a feedback loop to generate improved content and improved delivery of the content. uh, Teachers and students are both busy, and if there is a the platform could suggest or recommend how the interactions could be much more meaningful. So bringing the assisted recommendation and intelligent suggestions capability will be extremely useful, and that's something that institutes needs to look at as they look at improving the whole experience. And finally, the element around remote proctoring and assisted remote proctoring for the teachers, so that the kind of validation of the learning being imparted could be done much more seamlessly. Finally, as all of this evolves, looking at other technology mediums platforms to deliver the content in a differentiated experience led way, like VR, AR, could be looked at. Now, as I walked you through all of this, you would realize that it is a technology significant step that needs to be taken, and there is a need for institutes to not try to do it all alone. There are partners available, and a trusted partner should be looked at as they go on this journey. Moving on, I would like to talk a little bit about reactivate or reopening of the campus for students. It is a challenge in itself. COVID apart, the whole issue of the risks that it opens up and the associated legal liabilities, students making them comply to regulations is difficult, at times impossible. Ensuring social distancing related separations are also a challenge, and institutes are facing that. And finally, how do you select the right technology? There are so many solutions in the market today talking about contact tracing and social distancing, and how do institutes look at that to accomplish that? There are options available today with respect to thermal screening and also contact tracing. But my recommendation is essentially 3 T's. The first T is trust. How do you ensure that the student or the member which is returning back to campus is an entity which can be allowed entry. So building that element of trust, from a platform standpoint, is important for the institutes to create. The next thing is test or screen, which is essentially having the right tools in place at the entry exit to start off with, and then at so to say other locations where students or faculty members tend to congregate, and being able to kind of maintain entry or exit into those facilities through an automated screening process. The final is trace, which is using the right technology tools for doing monitoring of what contacts have taken place, and then take actionable recommendations from the platform, so that let's say activities around sanitization and so to say feeding back to the trust platform with respect to access control can be done. These are all very complex issues, and each of them require right selection mechanisms from an institute standpoint, with a right partner to go through the journey of making this change. So that's pretty much what I wanted to cover with you all. I hope this gave you some food for thought. And with that, we would be open for questions, I guess.
Great. Prakash, thank you so much. And we have some great questions coming in. I can't wait to get to them. So we'll continue to take your questions for the remainder of the hour. You can submit these by entering them into the questions module. So to kick things off, we had a number of questions around the, so if university education is about two things, it's about delivering information and learning, but it's also about the university experience and the social aspect. And Sanjay, you talked about the coaching aspect. So how can online learning, online learning can deliver the first part, but how about the second part? So the social, the coaching, the interactive, and one of the questions that came in was about someone who's, very much uses the Socratic method with very engaged with their students, jumping in, going back and forth, and that Zoom has been very challenging to do that. So do you have suggestions while we're still in highly online mode? Do you have suggestions for those aspects?
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy. I wish we did that more when we had the luxury of being together. And in fact, instead we squandered that time doing the thing we could do on Zoom. And I hope when we go back to being in person, we do the things that you can do online easily, such as coaching, Socratic, hands-on, all that stuff. It's not easy to do it online. And it's certainly not easy to do it with very short notice. I hope in the fall, people will get more creative. Yesterday, I was in a massive email discussion about should we send drills to our mechanical engineering students. And MIT is thinking deeply about sending out kits, etc. There's some safety issues we have to think it through. Electronics, students can build circuits, build things. Maybe students can connect things they do, each of them in their homes, with other people's things. So this will take some time to figure out. I think that the top schools, I should say the schools with the luxury of technology and frankly money, will probably figure it out. I do think that doing asynchronous videos helps, being more personal helps. For example, one of my colleagues, Arthur Barr, produces a very nice video about a particular topic he's interested in, ivory sculptures and triptychs, right? And so we just need to be a little bit less boring than simply doing what I'm doing to you now, which is just speak, and give people other ways to connect their learnings. It's going to be difficult, Abby. There's no sort of sugarcoating it.
Prakash, are there tools? Oh, go ahead.
Can I just say one more thing? Actually, very interesting little thing I discovered, which is there is one industry which has used augmented reality for almost 100 years. And were it not for augmented reality, this industry would not be viable. I'll let everyone think about it for a second, and then I'll tell you the answer. The answer actually is aviation. Flight simulators by the Link Trainer. The Link Trainer is 1930s. So it's too expensive to train in the air, actually. So you do a lot of stuff today with online and simulators, and it's engaging. And then you do the last piece in person, the coaching. And in fact, in World War II, the Germans and the Japanese had the planes, but America had the planes and the pilots because of the flight simulator. I'll stop there.
Great. And Prakash, are there other tools that that you're seeing that can help in this area in terms of creating more engagement, more collaboration, more interactivity?
Yes, yes. And we from Harman have also been investing in creating the right set of tools that can enable, like Sanjay talked about, different, mediums to deliver, content to the students, which goes beyond just the collaboration platforms like Zoom. And what we are seeing from our product and platform experience by our customers is that they find all of them very meaningful. There are certain contents which are more suited for a classroom kind of a collaboration platform, but there are other contents which require students to kind of spend time listening it to first, and then consuming and then coming back. So a lot of usage around some of those distributed learning tools coming from our side of the house, which are gaining a lot of popularity right now.
I've been doing some research in the in the commercial workspace, and a lot of companies are now employing some of those tools as well to do everything from simulations and augmented reality to go into enclosed spaces, for example, to how do we do agile in an online remote environment, and there are ways, there are tools, but people have to figure it out. So the next question has to do with, we will have this, if in fact things do evolve, the pandemic recedes a bit, and we do go to a more blended solution like you described, Sanjay, that asynchronous delivery of information, but then in person, much more engaged and interactive. What does that blended solution of online and on-campus teaching look like from the educator's perspective?
Well, the educator becomes a coach. There's a great book on this. I should be promoting my book, but I'm going to promote the book of an extraordinary man who unfortunately passed away last week. Anders Ericsson wrote a book called Peak on the science of expertise. He's a real pioneer. And what he talks about is the power of coaching. How does a great golfer become a great golfer? How does a great judoka become a great judoka? How does a great musician? And it turns out, and how did Michelangelo become such a great artist, right? Michelangelo never attended a lecture, and it's because of coaching, because of the studio he was in and the masters who taught him. Now, what that means is that we will have very few really talented people produce short 10-minute videos, which are very well curated, and students will be required to watch them. And there'll be online tests that they take to show that they've learned, and also that promotes learning using something called the testing effect or the retrieval learning process. And once they're done with that, they walk into the classroom, and the classroom is all about discussion, disputation, making projects, and solving problems on the blackboard with a coach. The professor is the coach, and that's the future in my view.
Is there an element also of peer coaching?
Oh yeah. Fast, a great question, Abby. Really agree with you on that. So it turns out that there are two benefits to peer coaching. One is if you teach, you clarify your own understanding. It's like having an open house in your head. You're inviting people into your head. You better get your furniture sort of lined up. But the second thing is, a peer is more sensitive to the challenges in the other person's understanding than an expert. It's called the expert blind spot. Experts have blind spots. A peer is more sensitive. And the pioneer in this is actually Maria Montessori. Maria Montessori discovered this. She didn't understand the science necessarily. She understood it from an instinctive perspective, but the science now backs it up completely. So peer coaching is a tremendous and unrecognized aspect of being together. Now, on the social networking front, which you asked me earlier, this generation is much more able to work on Google Docs and et cetera, and half a dozen ways to interact, and they can sort of make that up. Older students right now, it's difficult to get a social element going online.
Right. There was a question, I can't find it now, but there was a question about business models. And Sanjay, we talked about this previously in terms of, given the disruption and the massive changes and the hardships for many universities and other educational organizations, what is the future of schools and colleges from a financial perspective, and what will those business models look like?
I think you're going to see a massive shakeup. Unfortunately, tragically, as I said, a bunch of schools are going to die. They just won't make it because they were tuition dependent, just like retail stores are dying, right? Because they're foot traffic dependent, which is going to leave a bunch of students orphaned. In other words, they were in a school and the school is gone. It already happened before COVID. There were a few colleges that died, and they'll be picked up by others. And I think a lot of these other schools will go online, actually, because and the marginal revenue from online is the marginal cost is much lower, right, for adding a new student, so it's much more scalable. And they will give degrees and they'll become sort of a degree aggregation thing. Southern New Hampshire University is a great and extraordinary example, very innovative. Paul LeBlanc, in my view, is a pioneer, right? So I think you'll see a bunch of that happen. But I do think that the schools that want to focus on coaching the environment, sort of thinking about the learning experience, I call them learning engineers, right? They're the ones who will really flourish, and the rest will struggle, and they might as well go online. But then the problem with online is, as you know, with retail, Amazon is killing it. Google is killing it with the search. It tends to consolidate. So I think we're going to see a period of tumult triggered by this unfortunate event.
Prakash, what are you seeing?
So from our perspective, what we are seeing is, institutes should look at kind of how do they differentiate now, from their standpoint, and how do they make it much more engaging to the students so that the whole challenge around dropouts gets addressed better. So, I will take the example of devices and Internet of Things, wherein devices learn and they become better at the job. When you're trying to update such a system, you look at what necessary is relevant and aligned with the context of the device per se. So you push only that piece of information which is applicable. When you're doing from a remote education standpoint, apart from great content that institutes will create, the other aspect is understanding the context of the student and aligning the content delivery which is most relevant at that point in time. So how do you analyze and get data-driven insights from your platform so that you improve the overall content consumption of the students per se? How do you build on top of it to create a much more engaging student environment? I think where the market would go after the first step, wherein we have established a mechanism to get content to the students from the faculty remotely through tools like Zoom and other learning management systems. What we would see is an evolution of the platforms, create a digital, so to say, learning platform or engine, which is aware of the context of the student, which allows, so to say, peer-to-peer engagement like Sanjay was talking about, and feeds in to not just online, but as students return back to campus, so that it becomes much more elevated learning experience. And that's what I think, in my opinion, will truly differentiate institutes and so to say schools of the future, which are able to take this so to say paradigm change which has hit us to create a new business model and a new technology driven learning model that can allow them to create better students and better citizens for tomorrow in the fields that they are in. So that would be my opinion. It is a significant challenge, and technology is there to help. My only suggestion would be that don't look at like an interim stopgap measure that is needed to do things. Look from a perspective on what more could be done and how you can improve the student engagement. Otherwise, I'm afraid the whole risk of long distance relationship and dropouts will continue to hit us, from a student and institute standpoint.
Fascinating. We have a couple of questions coming in around privacy, and this is something that we had talked about before as well, whether that is because of, whether it's data privacy issues around the online learning piece and accessibility to what students are doing and their data, but also in the return to campus, if there's a lot of contact tracing and how's that data being used, how are institutions thinking through those issues, and what are the big concerns and what are some of the solutions?
Well, I'll just say that this is an existential question. I've worked in privacy for 20 years, right in front of Congress on some technology I developed on privacy, and it's center of mind. And I think that the fact that we're all hanging by this thread, which is the internet right now, right? I mean, online was this good to have, and suddenly we're all hanging by it, means that we're also putting everything out there on the internet. There's a record of the fact that someone attended this lecture, which might not have been if it it wouldn't have been so obvious, the record. I think that both in the online education front and certainly in the back to school front and the back to work front, we're entering new territory. Contact tracing is actually by definition intrusive, right? Now, there are ways to make it secure and private, and that's what Google and Apple, actually the MIT system, both PACT and SafePaths are working on, which is trying to protect it. But a lot of governments are going for a centralized approach because they want to do disease management in a centralized way. And I believe that these steps will be very hard to go back from, because you get the app and now you're sort of stuck with it. I also believe that privacy concerns are going to actually reduce the amount of contact tracing, because people won't download the app just because they don't want to be later on, maybe, I wouldn't say prosecuted, but penalized for violating social distancing, right? So it's a very, very tenuous, these are very strange times, and we're walking on very thin ice when it comes to privacy. And I wish I could tell you there's an answer. I actually think there is an answer, but it'll take extremely precise understanding and implementation by the leaders.
Does part of it, or does it start with being more open about what's being done and why it's being done and how the data is being used? Is that helpful?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's what Prakash is right now in India, and that's an issue that the Indian app ran into, which is what is the disclosure, what is the GDPR equivalent? Prakash can probably talk about that.
Sure. So maybe I can share perspective that we are seeing from a contact tracing and tracking standpoint. So a few things. First of all, Google and Apple have released their exposure APIs for companies to consume. Unfortunately, it is a distributed model from a university standpoint, so they do not have, so to say, access to what kind of contact behaviors that have been there, and they are looking then from a federal government standpoint to kind of ensure that contact tracing happens. From a perspective of privacy and enforcement, these solutions that are there in the market today actually require an adoption by all who are visiting the area per se for it to be effective, which means that you require a level of buy-in from the users. And as Sanjay was pointing out, the users buy-in is challenged because they are worried about what kind of privacy data is being collected. There is consent, and we have seen solutions which are allowing user a full visibility on what information is being captured from their devices, and B, so to say, tell them that what's the intended purpose. With those two conditions, what we are seeing from India's standpoint, and also in a couple of enterprises where such solutions are being rolled out, the adoption rate is significantly higher. People are more comfortable. Another interesting observation we had when we did such a solution rollout developed internally was it created an element of trust. So we have a solution in which we show the status of the individual as safe or at risk. This is the contact tracing history and the previous contact they had. Our employees started to ask the other employee whom they met, show what's your status on the app, and then only we can probably spend time together. So there is a benefit which for the community. For us, it was for our employees, which started to feel more comfortable returning back to office locations, because they trusted the technology which is there, which is allowing them to know that the contacts that they are having, at least they don't have a reported case of infection, and their contact tracing history also highlights that it's a safe person to meet. So it kind of is with those benefits coming in, and at the end we all carry the fear, we want to avoid the virus, and if technology can help in so to say mitigating some of that risk, we will be comfortable. Another thing, Abby, that we are seeing is using technology as a reminder for social distancing. So you do have solutions today which can let whom all you met, but there is a step forward in which it can remind you if you are so to say accidentally missing the social distancing requirements, and it could be configured to be not a nuisance but more a intelligent reminder, so that it helps for people to just realize that they are behaving in a more so to say social distance compliant manner, and they feel comfortable meeting people face to face when they return back to campus or to work. So we see definitely merit in that solution. But yes, overall it's a thin ice that Sanjay talked about, and different organizations, different regions have different policies, and we need to be mindful of that as we implement it.
And I would assume that being very careful about not abusing the access to data, because as soon as a bad thing happens to somebody, then that's going to start to shut down adoption. So here's an interesting question on sort of the access and equality. The question is, physical campuses provide relative equality of access and resources, but in online education and maybe in blended education, distance connection can amplify inequality and lack of access. How do we address those issues in our planning?
Well, look, I think that's online has its positives and it has its negatives. Actually, it also has positives from an equity perspective, which I'll share in a minute. But certainly, I think we should declare now in 2020 that the internet is as important as water, food, oxygen, healthcare, right? Think about it. I mean, just imagine today, if the internet didn't work, right? Imagine all the things that are being canceled. So we have to declare it a basic human right at some point. Communications has to be. It's also very democratizing because you have access to information. The other thing I'll say, and without that, yes, it is the inequities, it actually accelerates inequities. There's a digital divide. And we need to bridge the divide before digital rules the world, because the divide will leave people permanently behind. Now, having said that, there are some benefits to online as well. For example, we know that in a classroom with 100 people, the people in the back could be Instagramming and you have no idea, and they certainly can get the teacher's attention. But what we have seen with Zoom is it's actually democratizing because everyone's on the same panel. And the chat has actually been extremely successful. Students who wouldn't feel comfortable speaking in a classroom are much more comfortable chatting. And in fact, we might use chat on campus when we go back to campus. We might have a live chat where students can ask questions. And then the other aspect of it is that if you turn video off on other things you can do, there is also the aspect of anonymity. So at some level it's equalizing, but at another level it is deeply dividing because of the digital divide. But so I think as society need to address that chasm before it becomes too late.
So kind of a similar question. A number of people have written in about what about in developing and underdeveloped countries that maybe the infrastructure is not that great. How can these solutions, what kinds of solutions can they have? There's one from South Africa here, there's one from Pakistan, and how can they be made affordable?
I think the good news is cellular telephony, entertainment, etc. are driving a lot of this, so we need to piggyback off of that, right? Pardon me, I'm trying to cover the sun that is coming through my window and giving me a halo right now. So I think that clearly we would have to piggyback off other needs, such as cellular telephony. In India, for example, Jio. In the US, Netflix is driving a lot of adoption. But these are very existential questions, and I think as society we need to take them on.
Prakash, do you have thoughts on that?
Yes, sorry. So yeah, I agree with the assessment that certain developing countries, and especially in India, in certain locations, there is lack of devices on which students could access the content, and there is at times even lack of connectivity per se. But the way to mitigate it is to look at what can be done in the best possible manner. We have to live with constraints that are there, right? So essentially there are tools and platforms that are available which can allow to manage the experience with respect to how content get cached and consumed instead of continuously live stream, how you can change things like modify the resolution, the bit rates that are there to make it more suitable for so to say low capacity networks that are there, make it suitable for viewing in feature phones per se as compared to really expensive devices from a developing economy standpoint. Yes, Sanjay mentioned there are, so to say, uh, you know, uh, improvements happening on connectivity, because not just education, but everything is working from home, right? So those enhancements actually are going to assist enablement of some of these aspects. But yeah, till that time, look at technology tools which can start talking about supporting different device types, supporting work in different kind of network conditions, and then make the right appropriate technology choices.
We have time for one more short question, and this one is about it's about the structure and the pacing of learning. So Sanjay, you talked about 10-minute chunks of instruction, but if you have 10-minute chunks of instruction, that's a lot to absorb. So how do you see sort of the design and the pacing of learning going forward, especially in the online part?
Well, I mean, I think good point. I think that 10 minutes, there's a science behind the 10 minutes. The 10 minutes comes from the fact that we understand now the architecture of the human brain, and we know how this part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex works. We know how the hippocampus works. In about 10 minutes of absorbing knowledge, you sort of maxed out. And the brain needs to go into the mode of connecting the dots, which we dismiss as mind wandering or as daydreaming. But the brain actually needs to do that. But once you absorb information for 5 to 10 minutes, which is what the length of our MOOC videos are, then what you want to do is apply it, answer questions about it, and that actually promotes the transfer to long-term learning. You want to, for example, here's a little subtle thing. I mean, for example, if you tell one group of students, here's a video on assembling this thing, this little machine, and oh, by the way, the kit is outside the room. And you tell another group of students, here's a video on assembling this thing, but you don't say the second half. The first group learns better. It's fascinating how much things like context, curiosity, which generates dopamine, hands-on, uh, discussion, probing make a difference. So you got to, it's a whole package. And Zoom doesn't permit that. So actually Zoom is the worst of both worlds. We were doing socially distanced learning to begin with. So when social distancing became the norm, we just went to Zoom, right? Classrooms they have to use online, interleave in person. That's my point.
Yeah, and just to add to what Sanjay said, what we also look at, in our platform contributions is actual how much time students spent on a video, and gain from that data to feedback to improve what the duration and what the content and context needs to be. So, these data-driven insights really could help in defining the content as well.
Great.
From our perspective, yeah.
Great. Well, thank you both so much. Unfortunately, we're out of time, and so I want to thank you, Sanjay and Prakash, for a really interesting and informative talk. And thank you all in the audience for your attention and great questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of that. That's always the frustrating part. But over the next few days, you will get a feedback survey. We'll send you out via email. We really appreciate your feedback. It helps us make things better. And a recording of this program will be available within 3 to 4 business days. We'll let you know how to access that. We'll send the link to the recording as well as to a PDF of Prakash's slides. So final thank you to our sponsor, HARMAN International. This couldn't be a more timely and important topic, and we appreciate your leadership in this area. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Abby. Thank you, Prakash.
Thank you. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.